about Passivhaus and indoor air quality. Introduce yourself.
Go ahead and, while Mike's working out the that part, why don't you just go ahead and tell people who you are, Fred?
That's me, a part of me. I'm Fred Gordon. I'm a developer who building in a second.
Fred, can you give us 2 minutes about your background before developer? I'd just like to put the name and face.
Oh, that's real agony.
Well, no, I mean, in a sentence, just, I mean, developer's too broad for me. Why do you care?
Oh, well, I'm a frustrated academic. I have a PhD in philosophy, and I did a lot of work on organizational design around democratic workplaces, Harvard School of Education, and done a lot of research on cooperation and competition. And I had this building which I kind of fell into because I was completely broke and unemployable. And it happened to be in South Boston, which became kind of the center of a lot of development and quite valuable. And so I said, since I'm making some money, I should do something good with it and see if I could push a real energy efficient building to respond to climate change. And the rest is the misery of my life every day working with a general contractor and 3 million pounds of dirt, which we're fighting about who is going to pay to get rid of. So that's how I got here. All right?
That works.
This is a building before we began tearing things apart. This is in South Boston. That's the main building. That's an old rum distillery, and it's now home to about 150 artists and various other whatnots. And this was the bottling plant. And this Cooper Shop's the place where they make barrels. The rum used to go into barrels. And the thing sits on, at the end of the reserve channel, on what was the old shoreline of the city. Everything beyond us is still land, but the water came right up here. So the ships used to come in, and they used to offload molasses. They also offloaded roofing tar from a plant across the street, also known as coal tar, also known as a carcinogen. And after 11 years, we finally settled with Keyspan on a payment to us. It's a historic site, rich in local lore. So we decided to keep this building, but to tear down that one's already gone, and to build a building here, and then to tear this building down, build it out to the corner there, and that is will be 65 units of Passivhaus on top of 147 parking spaces. We've already insisted that the roofs be capable of greenhouses, all permaculture, a lot of PV, a lot of photovoltaics, and hopefully a transportation system. And the aim was to cut energy use on site 80% across the board: transportation, heating, cooling, and electrical loads. Now the next picture you'll see is looking at it from this direction. This is north, this direction is north, this direction is south. So we, to the BRA's delight, opened up the yard so the sun actually falls into it, and we did not build a enclosed courtyard to keep the neighborhood out. So we believe strongly that we relate to the community. This is a rendering of which is going to change. It's changed many times. It'll change again. But this is the building. I am now standing south. This is the building which is now being built, and it includes a cafe with a dance floor, a 3-story greenhouse, a food store, and the whole thing is roof gardens, greenhouse on the roof. By the luck of the draw, there was a tunnel underneath there by which they brought booze from the plant, distillery to the bottling plant. They brought it underground so it wouldn't be pilfered, and that allows us to have a full cycle circuit of the whole building. They have a circuit on the basement level, a kind of 2/3 circuit on the roof, and then a circuit intermediate. So I'm not going to talk an awful lot about the project. We have to answer questions about it, but there are 5 technologies which we are pushing, which we think is unique to this building. A lot of other stuff. This stuff we're really doing a lot of research on, one of which I'm going to talk about here, which is the project on indoor air quality that I'm working with Barry Stevens on. Aren't I?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I can come back to this if you want, but this has been an adventure and a half. What I'm going to do is talk about the kind of unique relationship between problems of indoor air quality and outdoor air quality. Barry's going to talk more about indoor air quality, and Passivhaus and the opportunities which heat recovery ventilators provide to solve a very serious problem. And this may get a little gruesome, but I'll describe what the problem is. Anybody here is looking for medical school or school of public health credits? Just joking. Anyway, so a lot of this is going to be about public health and biochemistry. I was also a pre-med, so a certain amount of that's going to go in. The problem is one of air pollution in urban environments. And the findings on air pollution are recent. When the U.S. Clean Air Act was passed in 1970, people were looking largely at big particulates, soots, and other things. And it wasn't until this study, in 1993, that they found out that the stuff which is really bad for you is microparticles. That's smaller than 2.5 microns. And it's actually much worse for you because it actually gets into your body and does all kinds of damage, which I will describe in great detail, but quickly. This is the study that came out of Harvard School of Public Health, and it was considered the most influential study in public health that was ever done, and it's correlated not with just small health implications, but very, very large ones. And we're talking about the United States. If you go to India or to China, it's obviously much, much worse. What we're talking about with microparticles is something of the size of these red dots. This gruesome thing is a hair. That is, these are typical, what are they, combustion particles, and these, this is blow up of that. So they're small. And this is an endless compendium. I don't expect everybody to read all of this stuff, but it's lots and lots of references about what these particulates do to you. there's sort of an overview of what they do. And I don't know whether there's any type of ailment or affliction of the human race that they're not involved in. But the first one, and we'll go through these very quickly, is autism, which is a recent study that is I think it was last year, there was a big study about rates of autism in Utah, where there are temperature inversions, and the rates are much higher because of microparticles. And these are more. And some of these autistic outcomes are due to effects in the womb. And that's Utah. And there is more. You can throw in some schizophrenia too. Second is IQ decline, and these are significant findings in New York, Poland, and so there are more. And then, of course, there's cancer. What's interesting here is the dates on a lot of these things, this is within the last 5 years. This has come to light. Stroke. And heart attack. They didn't really know why air pollution in the lungs was strongly correlated with heart disease. I think they understand it better within the last half years, that it's an inflammatory problem. But there's more autoimmune disease, shortened life expectancy, and this talks about China some. And I think the 2 years decline of life expectancy is in third world countries. But here in American cities, it's talking about deaths and social costs from urban air pollution. People should tell me whether I'm worrying you enough or whether I should do some more.
We know Barry's going to save us, so keep going.
That's why he's going first.
That's right.
I wouldn't want to finish with it.
It's sort of bad cop, good cop.
Okay. Now, I'm sort of a disease buff, and so essentially what's happening with these microparticles is breaks down to 3 categories. One is what's called epigenetic effects. Epigenetic effects is that pollutants change your genetic material, but not by changing DNA. They change it by changing side chains on DNA, which affect the expression of protein. So these are mainly acetyl chains. So it's a way that you get heritable disorders without actually altering your DNA. That's where you get the IQ decline, because the mother's DNA is altered, and in animal studies that goes on for 5 generations. Inflammation has to do with this research. I feel awful doing this to people. Has to do with the role of inflammation in a whole lot of major diseases, which they did not anticipate was the case. But it's extremely important in everything from gout to Alzheimer's to everything else. So, and the third is just cancer. So this is your friendly DNA, and these are the side chains which grow on there. And this is an article from Scientific American in 2014. Once again, what you see is that all of these dates are recent. And this is inflammation, and here, similarly, this is from this month that this stuff is coming out. And so inflammation is really bad for you. It's terrible to get things in your system which cause an inflammatory response, and that's what's evident here. Don't ever do that. Sorry about that. And then I will try to lead you out of the wilderness to some degree here. Passivhaus solves all of these problems with Zehnder equipment.
Now, we're not supposed to do that. This is all purely information.
So I'm not you. So this is, basically something about Passivhaus standards, and that you all know. What's really advantageous about Passivhaus is that you seal the whole house, so you do not get air infiltration from the outside. The size of these particles is such that you cannot exclude it in any way. You have air in the house, you have microparticles in the house. It's not like soot, it's not like mold, it's everywhere and anywhere. Because it seals itself and it has only one aperture by which air comes in, which is the heat recovery ventilator opening, it gives you an opportunity to filter air down to the microparticle level. And this is unreadable, but it's interesting if you can read it. These up here are particles which begin with very, very big stuff, and it goes down to oxygen. So this is a logarithmic micron scale. When you get to microparticles, that is the green thing. And I think anthrax is somewhere in there. But this is an MERV 16 filter. MERV has to do with how fine the filtration is. If you have an MERV filter, then you are doing this section of microparticles from here up. You're not doing the bottom part. Now, if you push a little further to MERV 17, 18, which you can do, then you're down to here. You're down to almost everything. You're down to bacteria. You're not down to viruses, or not all of them, but some of them. So that does the trick. It does. And the air that you take in from the outside does not have microparticles. And all of those diseases which you have, which are caused by microparticles, the microparticles are vented out, or they're not coming in through the filter. Now, the wisdom here of everybody you talk to is that you can't do that, because if you have a very, very fine filter, you have tremendous back pressures, and you have tremendous energy loads to drive the HRV in order to reduce the microparticles. And so everyone, in fact, that conference that I went to up in Maine, they said the same thing. Your competitor says you can't do it because you won't get airflow. You won't get airflow. They said. They were wrong. In fact, this is the familiar formula that everybody knows, which simply says that the energy consumption is a product of the speed of the fan versus the resistance. The resistance, or the pressure change. The pressure change is a function of the resistance. The resistance is a function of how fine your filtration is. So the more the finer the filter, the more the resistance, the more the electricity costs. However, what we find is that with HRVs. The rate of airflow is so low that the increase in energy loads is minimal. That what this graph is showing is that back pressure goes up in a curvilinear way. As you increase the velocity of the fan, you get rapidly mounting back pressures, rapidly mounting electrical loads. If you stay way down at the low end, which is what you do when you run an HRV 24/7, you have minimal loads. How minimal? This was Cyril Villay, who was an intern, a very bright guy, and he talked with Barry, and he got a lot of this data. And this, just this cautionary thing, is only talking about moving from MERV 7 to 8 to MERV 13. We want to move all the way up to 16 or 18, but this gives you something of an idea of what it would cost to run it electrically and to pay for the filters that you change. That's your number, $9.66 a year. You figure with an MERV 16, 18, it would be somewhat more than that, but not an enormous amount. Now, if you have problems with back pressure, because of forcing all this air through a filter, there are devices that you can use, which is just to use a larger filter. You have a larger area, and so with the same pressure, you get more air going through. So we're trying to work with Barry about whether to just up it in the machine as it exists, or whether to create a, what do you call it?
Casings, the filter case.
Yeah, in order to have a larger area. And that is pretty much it, except the take-home thing is that to build a passive house is to do a very good thing. You reduce greenhouse gases, so you are one of 8 billion people. You reduce greenhouse gases 1/8 billion, which is worth doing. But if you can, while creating that beneficial effect, also bring better health and comfort to yourself and your family, that's a double incentive. And that is a way of telling people that they're doing good in a broad universal way, but they're also doing good in a personal way, both at the same time and at a very, very low incremental cost. That's
Can take questions?
Let's have Barry go ahead and then do questions together at the end. Is that okay? Unless somebody's got something pressing for Fred. Take it away, Barry.
How long did I take? Just about right.
When should I be done? The best way to.
If we're going to leave some time for questions, no later than 7:30, let's say.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so you got Rich. See if it works.
All right. Okay, everyone. I am Barry Stevens. I'm from Zehnder. I do know a lot of people in here. Those that don't know me, I've been with Zehnder America for about 15 years, and we started Zehnder America the week after 9/11, so it's easy to remember. And I've been working with heat recovery ventilation systems for about 6 years now, as we developed it and started bringing it to the States. And in those travels, I've gotten immersed into the indoor air quality and health aspects. It's almost been a, pulled into it as we've gone around the country. And I will say what I'm going to do today tonight is share some of the research that's being done now. And there is a very bubbling up amount of study and focus on indoor air quality, ventilation itself, and what works in homes. Any of you who have been following the ASHRAE 62.2 conversations, There's a major battle right now going on with ASHRAE 62.2, and there's a faction with Joe Stebrick and those folks, and then there's the guys from Lawrence Berkeley and all, and I won't get into a lot of that, but I will say it's coming to a head right now, and ASHRAE 62.2 may be thrown out completely and started over. That's how far it's gone. I am privy to some conversations with that are pretty much on the inside. So with that, what I want to do is really kind of relate this to Passivhaus, because that's what we're doing here. And I'm preaching to the choir on a lot of this stuff. But when you build a Passivhaus, you build that envelope that's extremely tight, well sealed and insulated. That makes your life a lot easier on controlling what's inside and what's outside. And that gives you the opportunity to filter the air coming and going. And so it eliminates a lot of the problems that you have with conventional houses. I'm going to talk about some of that as well. So passive houses are an avenue to healthy homes. It's a bottom line. And I think one of the things as we go out and those that are practicing passive house, it's sometimes a sell job to get people to go that way. As we know, we're still a niche. I believe that indoor air quality and health is going to be a major factor in housing in the next 5 to 10 years. And that's from me traveling around the country, all over the country, and seeing this. British Columbia, the entire province of British Columbia, it started in Vancouver. Now the entire province requires heat recovery ventilations in all new homes. Code standard now. And I believe that's the foothold that's going to spread.
You know what their air tightness standard is there?
Last I knew it was 3. So they're getting there. And it's one of those things where you have to bring the industry along with the code. All right. So this is just showing that, you know, this was in Green Builder magazine, Clear the Air. It's all about ventilation and indoor air quality. This is a article from a magazine in England. Right there it says that 13.3 million homes in England have been identified as with sick home syndrome.
That's old.
Yeah, but that's...
Are you surprised, Mark?
No.
So, there is a... It took 80 years to put a label on the pack. Think about that. So here we've got what's going on, as Fred talked about some of these things. These are some statistics from 2001 to 2009. It went from 20 to 25 million people with asthma. And they estimate about 8 million homes throughout the country have elevated levels of radon, and we all know radon can be very hazardous to your health, basically can cause cancer. This is a study that the EPA did. These are all the different nice things called VOCs that are found in homes, and this is the percentage of homes, and this was a huge swath of homes. This is the percentage of those homes that had those things in them. So down to here, over half of those homes had all of this stuff. If you read that list, it's not good stuff. It's not great to have in your house. So the way I see it, you know, the 2012 building code's 3 ACH 50. So by 2090, Congress will pass the hazard. They'll have to put a label on your house if we don't do something about this. And it's kind of funny, but again, it's not. Our houses, if we don't do something about it, are continue to make us sick.
Just curious, age span of the homes that were studied, did it range from?
It was, yes, it was a very wide swath. I don't know all the details of it, but it was a very wide swath of homes. It was random and of all ages. Okay, so we're looking at effectiveness of ventilation because ventilation is really the key to all this. I'm going to talk about that. Fred's talking about that stuff from outside we want to keep out with filters. We're going to talk about what's inside as well and what happens with it. We've been doing some little studies. This is over in our place in Holland. And these are two houses, little doll houses basically, that are set up to have ventilation systems in it. And what you've got is this one's got a whole house HRV system, and this one has an exhaust only in the bathroom for comparison. And they did some studies of what happens with different effects of different things on these houses. And just a takeaway on this is those two houses, with no disturbance, those houses just sitting there, they both took about 8 minutes to clear out this room here. But with the open window in the master bedroom, and this is the child's bedroom, okay? So this is the master bedroom, this is the child's bedroom here. So studying that, you can see with the open window in the master bedroom, the child's bedroom with just exhaust only took 20 minutes to clear. And with the wind in the master bedroom, it only took a minute. Doesn't make any sense, okay? Don't spend too much time trying to make sense out of it. What the takeaway is with the balanced ventilation system, basically a heat recovery whole house ventilation system, it was very consistent. Without, it's not, and you don't know what's happening with it. Small takeaway. There was a major residential ventilation study done last year. It was primarily, the work was done by Washington State University at the conference that Fred and I, the main indoor air quality and energy conference, David Hales, who's listed on there as one of the main guys on that, did a presentation on this study up in Portland. And in the interest of disclosure, my brother Charlie Stevens was the lead author of this. He's a senior codes and standards engineer at the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. And as they're requiring with codes houses to be built to 3 ACH 50 or better, they're wondering what's happening over here with as far as ventilation and health in those homes. So they didn't have any answers. Nobody had any data. So they went out and made a major study across Oregon, Washington, Montana, and Idaho, 4 states. That's the states that NEA operates in. They got 29 homes at 3 ACH 50 or better. And some homes had exhaust only. Some homes had HRVs with integrated into the air handler, plugged into the furnace basically. And some had whole house balanced ventilation systems. And they studied extensively what was happening in those homes. And different behaviors, doors open to the bedrooms, doors closed, all throughout a fairly large range of seasons, winter, spring, summer, and got a lot of data. Actually, I forget what I was told. It was something like, ungodly amount of data that they had to pick through and sort through. But they had some takeaways on it. This is just one slide. This study is available. It's quite long, and the paper that's been released is available. I don't have the link with me, but afterward, if you want to get my card, and I can get you the link to it if anybody's interested. This is just a basic part of it where this is the second bedroom in the house and the master bedroom. And what you've got is at the bottom, these are the combined systems, C. These are all exhaust only, bath fans basically, and these are heat recovery ventilation whole house systems. And both are the same. And you've got 3 behaviors. The green is no system running. In other words, ventilation turned off. And you've got red is where the door is closed, and blue where the door is open. All right. And that usually gets people thinking when you look at that. With the doors closed, the HRV systems actually turn the air over. This is air changes. This scale here is air changes per hour, with this being 1 right here. Oh, wait a minute. That's 2. So that's air changes per hour. So the higher up the graph, the more air changes you have in the rooms. So it's pretty obvious which of that group you'd want to be sleeping, which bedrooms you'd want to be sleeping in. It's down in this end where you got better air changes in the bedroom. All right. Any questions with that? I want to keep moving, so.
I'm just kind of confused about the left side of the graph and the right side of the graph.
These two here are combined systems. That's an HRV plugged into an air handler.
Oh, okay.
And then all of these are with the E, so that you have C right here is combined. E is exhaust only, and H is heat recovery ventilation, whole house or whatever. Okay. So, you know, in a nutshell, the takeaway is you've got a lot better air changes here. All right. I'm not going to tell you which ones are ours, but I do know. Another thing they took away from this that's very interesting is this is a HRV running continuously, and you can see that the graphs you want to see are, this is the domestic hot water. You don't have to worry about that. This is the master bath temperature and relative humidity. So temperature is right straight across. This is relative humidity. So what you've got is it started out at 29% relative humidity. At the end of the shower, it's 33, and then it went right up to 65. They call it the peak. 65% relative humidity, and then it goes back down. When it got back down, that's 30, 29, basically. They call that back to balance. That took an hour and a half through that entire process. Now, if you use, this is exhaust, HRV is exhaust fan. This is an HRV running exhaust only. So it's only running exhaust out of the bathroom. That same process took 5 hours with an exhaust only. And they found this consistently with exhaust bath fans in the bathrooms. The humidity levels stayed elevated much longer than when, and running a bath fan at say 50 or more CFM as opposed to running an HRV at as little as 20 CFM continuous in a bathroom. The humidity in the bathrooms dropped much more quickly with heat recovery ventilation systems.
Presumably this is with keeping the bathroom door closed.
They had a different running them both, but presumably it is closed, yeah.
So why does it take 5 hours?
Yeah.
Because that exhaust only is, all that moisture is staying in there with a heat recovery ventilation system balanced. You're moving air constantly through. With an exhaust only, you depressurize the house, and then all that moisture sits.
I don't understand the title of the,
Yeah, the HRV.
HRV is an exhaust fan. What does
Well,
that mean?
it basically is exhaust only. It's running exhaust only. It's not
So this
running
is an
balanced
HRV?
ventilation.
This is an HRV?
Running only one fan.
One way.
Exhaust only. It's depressurizing the house.
Okay.
What's the CFM?
I don't know what the exact, I'd have to look into that, but it was boosted during this. I know it was boosted, and it probably was somewhere around 30 to 40 CFM in the bathroom.
Gary, why did the RH start out so high, much higher?
Well, the different climates. So these are 29 homes across. It may be in Seattle, or it may be in Portland, or it may be in Idaho, and so forth. So, you know, it went a lot higher. Went from 45 to 86 as well. So it went higher and so forth. It really is just a demonstration that a lot of the conventional wisdom that we have isn't holding true. And, you know, we hear this all the time. People say, well, you know, HRVs don't exhaust the moisture out of the bathroom. I'm going to put a bath fan in also on top of our system. It's not needed, and we've already got plenty of data to prove that. But they confirmed this out there. So if people are saying that a balanced ventilation system with continuous ventilation out of a bathroom isn't going to be enough, and I want to put, and we've actually had people put in line with our HRV ducting a Panasonic bath fan, for example, to boost when they turn it on, and it's crazy.
Do you get this?
You mentioned that the MERV 14 when it's that high, and how is it affected by the relative humidity in the air? In other words, does the humidity make it harder to put that fine particulate together?
Over an extended period, no, because that moisture is going to be ultimately wicked away and go away with the air. If you're running continuous ventilation, it may intermittently, if you take a shower and there's a lot of humidity, you may catch some of that, but it's ultimately going to go with the outgoing air.
The high filtration is only on the air coming from the outside, it's not on the exhaust.
Right.
There's no need to have it on the exhaust. No, two separate filters.
So you're showing us the use of an HRV running in just unbalanced
Just
mode.
exhaust, yeah.
Do you have another slide that shows the difference when you run it in balanced mode?
On that same project, I don't have it. I don't know if they have that data, but
So how do we know what the difference is between running exhaust only and running with HRV in balanced mode?
They measured a bunch of them with HRVs, a bunch of them with exhaust only, and it was consistent, I'm told, on what they were showing. This is indicative, typical of what they found.
And you're saying an HRV will bring it back?
It was more effective, a balanced ventilation system running continuously was more effective.
But you don't have
reducing
something to
humidity.
show us that shows that.
Slide before was showing.
And did they ever try a ERV as far as seeing if the time difference?
They don't have in the Northwest, they really don't use them, so
In the
HRVs are
Portland
almost
area where
universal.
they're, because a lot of that new air coming in is so moist. that
It
you're
isn't.
adding-
The humidity in Portland and Seattle, the actual moisture content in the air is not high. It's not what people think. It isn't. They use HRVs out there almost exclusively. You might recognize this.
I do.
This is compliments of Mike. And this was a little thing he did where he had a unventilated bedroom and when you turn the fan on right here, I believe, right?
That's right.
So the bath fan got turned on here at 1:45 in the morning. And even with the bath fan on, exhausting, like they're saying, with ASHRAE 62.2 using exhaust only, supposed to be ventilating the house. Well, it's not doing a very good job because the CO2 levels continue to climb all the way up past 2,000. And then the door gets opened, and, right? That's where the door was open. I think it's all down there. Yeah. Then they open the door, and it drops back down. With the door closed and a bath fan going in the bathroom, it's not doing much for the bedroom. And we found this.
Is this a house that you were testing?
This is my house.
What's the pressure across the?
Notice the house at 5 air changes per hour at 50?
Yes.
I'm not proud of that.
What's the pressure across the door when it's closed? The system's running.
There isn't much really because there's no incoming air. The gap below the door is fairly large. That's not the problem, I think.
You got to make up air.
That much leakage in the
Nothing.
bathroom?
This is a bedroom.
No, there's the fans in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Getting the air from
The situation is that there's a bedroom, a hallway, and a bathroom. And when I turn the fan in on the bathroom across the hall, there's not enough driving force to cause enough air to come into the bedroom to keep the CO2 under control.
Well, the bedroom air is just not smart enough to go away.
It didn't follow the arrows.
So, one other, and I will say that our company and our systems around the country are probably the most studied. And then there's a double-edged sword to that, believe me. You know, like we sold the system to Mark Rosenbaum.
Yeah, big mistake.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's been finding all our every weakness we might have. So, this is a house, it's called the Hayward Healthy Homes. This guy named Bill Hayward from Hayward Lumber, who's our dealer in California. He has a history of, he bought a 9-year-old house in Monterey, California, moved his family in, and within, I think, less than a year, they were all in the hospital with mold-induced serious illness. His daughter's growth was stunted. They had mold spores in their blood, serious mold issues. The house was condemned and torn down. So Bill became a fanatic about indoor air quality and health, got us to make him the dealer for California. And he built a house in Monterey that is a model for his new kind of a division of his company, which is called Hayward Healthy Homes. So it's all about healthy materials and healthy design and everything else. Heat recovery ventilation is just one aspect of it. He's talking about the insulation and the paints and everything about it. And he was fanatic about this house, building this house to be extremely healthy. At one point, this house has our radiant ceiling system in it for heating and cooling. That's something we do in Italy. We installed that system. Those panels had to be pulled out because he smelled something in the insulation and wasn't sure. So he ripped all the insulation out and replaced it. That's how fanatic he was. And then before this is before he moved in. This is the empty house. This is VOCs, the green. This slide got a little cut out. It's over here. It says the green is VOCs. This is carbon dioxide. Light blue is carbon monoxide, and this color here is fine particulates. And they're measuring this both with sampling and with sensors. And before they moved in, they took this sampling, and this is where everything was. Those are not good levels. He was shocked, and he was pretty upset. And then right here, they turned the HRV system on, and you can see 6 p.m. to midnight, and by 6 a.m. the next day, all of those things came right down and were at this very low level. And he's continuing to monitor. So ventilation, dilution is critical to this stuff. I had an online exchange with some guy recently about saying, well, it's all about, source control, that's it. You just don't put VOCs in your house. Good luck with that.
The MERV was on this?
I'm sorry?
Do you know what the MERV was on the filter that they were using?
13.
13?
Yeah.
But this is indoor pollutants. The MERV
Yes.
filter is outdoor pollutants, so it's not.
Well, it's
Talking
yeah.
different things here.
Well, it will affect this, which is the fine particulates.
All right.
That will be a factor. And this little bump here, this is 6 people taking a tour through the house. They could actually see what was happening. And you can see it got brought right back down afterward, but they stirred everything up when they walked through the house. And it's sand in the yard and so forth, so they probably brought dirt and everything else in with them and walked through the house. But this tells you, no matter how fanatic you are about indoor source controls, you really need ventilation. Dilution is critical. And that's, the idea with a passive house. I threw this in here just to talk about, this is a typical attic above your insulation. And the fact that you've got ceiling that's completely sealed off and tight, if you do depressurize the house at all, you're not going to be pulling all this stuff down from the attic, not having penetrations through ceilings. The same goes for crawl spaces and basements. Having that all sealed and completely tight is really critical. We're seeing where in a couple cases we've had anecdotal, it's not scientific, but there was a passive house, and that same organization that did the ventilation study in the Northwest did a little spot check on a brand new passive house, I believe, don't quote me. Really quickly as they were monitoring that. They switched it back to balanced whole house ventilation, and the radon levels went right back down to 0. And Peter Schneider did a similar thing in his house up in Vermont, where he ran for ASHRAE 62.2 2015, accordingly to following their thing, ran a bath fan continuously, and he was pulling stuff out of his crawl space into his house, and he has kids, and he said, I'm not doing that anymore. He had one of those black boxes from out in Illinois that collects the air and sample it, and you take it and you get a detailed analysis. And he didn't like what he saw at all, and quickly turned the exhaust fan off. So it really does make a difference on this stuff. And then humidity, controlling humidity is all part of it as well, and that's all part of proper ventilation as well. And this is from the Health Canada, and this is optimum zone here as far as 30 to 55% is what they say is your blue zone for humidity. Don't agree?
You should talk to Bill Rose about this particular graph. It's kind of out of date, and people in this room don't want to be running their passive houses probably at 55% relative humidity. So,
not that high, you're saying?
Yeah, the blue zone should be to the left.
The dry side is a factor. All right. So just a little bit about the energy side of things and how this all works. Passivhaus is basically prescriptive with that. But to get a little bit of understanding in some of these things, just looking at a Passivhaus, small, 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 1,500 square feet, 0.3 ACH is 60 CFM, using 30 degrees outside, 70 degrees inside is nice and easy. If you took a 60 CFM continuous running fan, there's a formula you use, it's 1.08 BTUs per cubic foot times 60 CFM, cubic feet per minute, times the degree delta T, 40 degrees, over 24 hours. That means that bath fan is going to blow 62,496 BTUs of energy out of your house. Extracting and throwing 60 CFM, 70 degree air out of the house. What's making up for that is 30 degree air coming through the cracks and everything else doing your makeup. So you have to basically use that much energy to reheat the 30 degree air that's sucking back in through the cracks. If you just use an intermittent fan for a couple hours a day, say 120 CFM, intermittent 2 hours a day, that's the formula. Now, if you use a 75% efficient HRV, doing the same thing, 60 CFM continuous, you use the same kind of formula, but instead of the 40 degree difference, we're capturing 75% of that in heat recovery, and so it reduces it to 15,000 BTUs a day, but the difference is your makeup air is coming in at 60 degrees. Then if you plug in 90% efficient HRV, same formula, capturing 90% of that energy. We won't get into the nuts and bolts of all this, this is just for demonstration purposes. So you're down to much smaller amount of BTUs. You can see on the graph here, down to 6,200 BTUs. And this, to me, is the number one difference, comfort. The air's coming in at 66 degrees rather than 60 or 30. So that's the efficiency part of why efficiency matters from a comfort and energy standpoint. Just a little note on, some of you may have heard me talk about this, or some of you may have heard Eberhard Paul from our factory in Germany, who did this a couple years ago at the NESI, and this is one of the slides he used. Passivhaus Institute measures energy efficiency of heat recovery different than Home Ventilating Institute. Whereas Passivhaus measures the extract here. They're measuring the temperature leaving the house, the temperature outside when it goes out, and what the temperature is here. So what they're measuring is much like an R value measures how much energy is lost to the outside. They're measuring how much energy is lost to the outside. That formula I just showed you, if I measure the temperature of the air leaving the house here, I can tell how many BTUs I blew out of the house. It's that simple. I can make my HRVs run really, I can make this really good using various tricks. Unbalance the system so that the air is coming in more slowly than going out, or vice versa. You can play with that so that the air warms up more coming in. But what happens is the air that's going out doesn't transfer as much of the energy, and therefore you're losing heat to the outside. So it may be coming in, if that's that same 30 degrees inside, it may be coming in at 66 degrees, showing 90%. But if it's going out at 45 degrees and it's 30 outside, I'm losing a lot of energy that way. Everybody understand that? So this is what Passivhaus with the PHPP, which is designed to okay. There's a lot goes on inside that box. I don't have a lot of slides on that, but there's a lot that happens in this HRV. You've got fans running. Well, those are electric motors. Well, electric motors have waste heat. So your air is actually, from the outside, is going through there and actually coming in contact with that fan and the motor. And so that heat is going to warm up that air. If you're using a lot of energy on your fan motor, you're going to have a lot of waste heat, and therefore you're going to appear, and that's why they call it apparent sensible effectiveness. It appears to be very efficient, but it isn't necessarily. You also have the insulation around that box. It's inside a 70-degree room. If energy is transferred through a non-insulated or a box that's got thermal bridges, just like your house. You know, I've seen HRVs with just aluminum boxes. How many of you build a house with aluminum, skin and call it a day? That's an R2 box sitting in your room with 30-degree air coming into it is going to lose some energy, and you're going to have the room heating up the airstream as well. So those are all factors. So what can happen is you can get this very big difference between those two. This can be, if you follow this formula, and these are actual numbers that we've compared, and this does happen. You can see that this is HVI, and this is Passivhaus for a bunch of those systems. We've actually measured these in the lab. And you can see that the difference is the delta T between that is the difference in efficiencies on the numbers. And it's not consistent. That's the biggest thing, is this is 18%, this is, so it varies across that. And it can be a pretty big difference. It also can be a real small difference, usually with very high efficiency units, okay? So with a heat recovery ventilation system, just very quickly, and what we do is we design systems using a cascade system where we're not putting air into and out of every room. We put, primarily in residential, we put supplies into bedrooms and living spaces and exhausts out of bathrooms, kitchen, maybe a mudroom, maybe a laundry. We always like to ventilate, supply, and return in a basement to turn the air over there. So you've got exhaust, bathrooms, kitchen, supply into bedrooms, living space, and it looks like that. And the reason we do this is it's a better, more efficient way to do it. To give you an idea, you could put air into a walk-in closet if you wanted, or call it in the bedroom. Let's say we have two bedrooms on this end, and we have a bathroom and a kitchen here. And these aren't code numbers or anything else. This is just for easy demonstration purposes. Let's say we got 20 exhaust out of the kitchen and 20 out of the bathroom for 40 CFM. So we're going to be balanced. So we're going to put 20 out of each bedroom to make our 40, or we'll put 10 out of each bedroom and put 20 in that living room, because that living room's big and that needs ventilation, right? Which is a better method? Bedrooms. Absolutely, because consider this a duct. So if I put 10 in each bedroom, that's going to be 20 coming down through here, and then it comes through the living room and joins up with the 20 that I've got in the living room, and then goes, and it's out. All I've done, I haven't changed the living room ventilation or air changes. I had 2 ducts coming in here, and I had this one, 20 coming down the hallway and through. So I'm moving 40 CFM through the living room both ways. But what I do by putting some ventilation supply in the living room is I've robbed the bedrooms of half of their air changes. I reduce the air changes per hour by going from 20 CFM to 10 CFM in those bedrooms, and I've significantly impacted how much air change and how much I'm going to move and dilute and get rid of CO2 and so forth. So we use the cascade system, and we always look at each design, and we have to, if you add an office over here, we may have to put some ventilation supply there and so forth. But we look at how that air is going to move through a house, through a dwelling, through an office, through a building, and try to use that. Get the proper air changes and meet all the requirements for code and so forth. Then installation is critical. Following the design, having it installed accordingly and done properly. And then the last thing that is the most important that we've been at is the commissioning or quality assurance QA at the end. And we've been developing a network, and for your interest, Mike, I'm ready to have you sign up because we bailed with BPI. So we were working with BPI nationally, and just wasn't working out in the end. We've taken it in-house, and now we're expanding. We're going to be working with, for example, FIAS Plus and ResNet Raiders, where applicable, and we're developing a network across the country of quality assurance agents to go in. Third party, go in and check and make sure that this design got installed properly. And, we don't have the things like we have with the ducts to nowhere, where there's no exhaust out of a bathroom. We can't figure out why. Well, that's because the ducts never actually made it to the bathroom. They're in that stud wall right there. That's happened. And the other one is, if you have a single diffuser with 2 or 3 ducts coming into it, let's say 3, and you're down in a place in Hoboken, and you only get 9 CFM out of the kitchen when you're supposed to be getting about 40, and you can't figure out why until you figure out that they put 2 supplies and 1 exhaust into the same diffuser. That's why we do QA, to figure out when things didn't get done quite right. And that's really important. And then the last part of it is balancing that system so that that house has the same amount of air coming and going. And the way systems work, it has to change in about 80% of the cases. We change our motor power accordingly on the supplier return to balance the whole house on the system when we actually measure. Okay, so that's the last step. That's what it looks like. You've got all these different components, ducts, casings, boxes, covers, are all going to add to static pressure on, 1, the supply side, 2, the exhaust side, and they may not be equal.
Is that the reason why they put 2 filters in, just to keep the a little more balanced from a...
No, it's just a matter of you get cut me off here?
No, I'm having trouble with the audio. I'm trying to figure out why.
And so when it's minus 10 degrees outside, the air comes in across that coil and raises it up above freezing. You don't have any frost issues or anything, and then by preheating it into the HRV, we get much better efficiency across the whole system. In the summer, it takes and pre-cools that air and dehumidifies it. There's a drain here, you can see it condensate. We've seen as much as 3 gallons a day from people that are putting that and keeping an eye on how much humidity we're pulling out of the air.
Is there any data anywhere on what that does to pool?
That thing is providing, of course it depends. We are working on a model to do just that. And we want to do it for several climates because it's not just about, what Martin was looking at was just defrost, comparing it to if you used electric defrost or something. The thing is, anytime the air gets below 40 degrees, this pump kicks on and it runs 10 watts. And it's providing a boost to get this, and we've seen it at the minus 25. We actually took it in the lab in Toronto that does the HBI testing, Exava, and we've made up our own protocol because there isn't one. We use 45 degrees to be conservative for the ground temperature, and we ran that at the minus 25 C test that they do for HBI, which is minus 14 degrees Fahrenheit. And running at minus 14 Fahrenheit, coming in, and 70 degrees in here, we were getting 69.5 degrees coming out of the HRV. 99% apparent sensible effectiveness. Corrected for energy use, we were getting 91% sensible recovery efficiency.
Did you try turning it off and see what?
That's at minus 14 Fahrenheit. Oh yeah, well we know that at minus 4, we can't even run the unit for very long. It freezes up and then you have all sorts of issues. So the efficiency is extremely high, but even more than that is the comfort. You're getting air in, Torsten Schlupp up in Alaska is running this at minus 50. And when it's 70 inside, he's getting 67 degree air coming in the house. He's using 42 watts total power to provide ambient temperature air into his house when it's 50 below zero outside. It's hard to beat something like that.
That reduction in the summertime is really kind of key too.
We've looked at the amount of energy, and this is during those periods, but the amount of energy, we actually, during the HBI testing, we actually got the amount of energy that we were producing out of the ground. And our competitors wanted us to use that as a penalty for the efficiency. They wanted us to be charged for the energy we got from the ground. That wasn't fair. So, but we figured it out. It had a COP of 26 to 28 when it was running at minus 25 C or minus 14 Fahrenheit. We were using 12 watts of power at the pump to produce the amount of energy we were getting from that system, and warming that air up was a COP of 26 to 28. So it's hard to beat.
Is that a Zehnder add-on?
Yes, it is.
And is the second large pipe the exhaust?
This here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the exhaust going straight out of the HRV. It's not out of this, it's out of the HRV. Yeah. The HRV is right behind here, so yeah, it comes up and goes out. Yep. And that just discharges straight out. Now, one thing to keep in mind is, now that the air's coming in, it's not coming in, let's say it's 10 below zero. It's not coming into the HRV at 10 below zero, it's coming into the HRV at 40. So the air going out is going out at, say, 42 degrees. So you got to keep that in mind. But the net efficiency is just off the chart.
Did you just suggest that the preheater rose the temperature 30 degrees, 40 degrees?
Yes.
Do you have units that have done that?
I can give you Peter Schneider's number, and we got 10 of them we're monitoring. I could go on my phone and show you them. Yeah. That's a graph showing what it's doing up in Vermont. So this is an actual system. Red is the air temperature. This is without the unit. This is before we turned it on, so you can see without the pump running what was happening. Now that box is sitting in the room, so it warmed it up very slightly. But then once the pump started running here, you can see what happened. It stayed at around 38 was the lowest you have in this whole thing. Okay. So when it was 0 degrees, we were at 38 degrees, and you can see the line between this is the air coming in the house and this is going out of the house.
So what does that
So
do?
at 0 degrees, we're getting about a delta T of about 1.5 degrees there.
If you're using the Passivhaus calculation,
It's in German only and metric. There's a woman coming on Thursday in New York City, and Aubrey and John and I are going to basically drag her in a back room and tell her she needs to get that translated for us. So we're trying to get that because it's a formula you can put in data and so forth, and it'll get you a value that you put into the Passivhaus PHBP. And it's a really valuable number. It's significant.
Yeah, so just to tie what Fred was talking about in with what you're talking about, you've got, I mean, one thing that frustrates me about ventilation standards is they're prescriptive standards rather than performance standards. And, you know, I understand why that. You know, I don't really like it, but, you know, I would love to figure out, you know, I think some people are starting to try to figure out ventilation controls that do sample the air and do try to develop some sort of performance.
Demand control based on indoor air quality, or
based on measuring something in the air, and I realize.
And we do CO2. We can do RH. You can actually do almost with our units. We have 3 on the larger units. They have 3 inputs for an analog input for a 0 to 10 volt input. So if you can get a sensor for any number of things, then you can drive it with that. So that can be done to a point.
I understand that, but what I would like to know is what, if you or Fred is aware of any research that indicates what, you know, what your setting should be. You know, what is it? You know, CO2. What is it? What do you want to set it at? And to what extent does that have an impact on the 2.5 micron particulates and that sort of thing? How do we actually take all this information and figure out how to implement it in a house?
Yeah.
I mean, right now we're taking it on faith that some runtime is going to do it for us.
One thing that's a big conversation that is going on right now is about controls, connectivity. And once we get past that, I want to see it on my iPhone, so I'm at the bar and I can show people my HRV. That works good for 2 weeks. But once we get past that, there are some very important metrics that you can use with automated controls and so forth, and so that is something that is being looked at. I will say our European colleagues, my European colleagues, the general consensus is these are your lungs. Your house is breathing. You don't stop breathing. You can slow down, and I think that's what you're getting to. You can change the rate of breathing, but don't stop breathing. Again, because your house is going to have always stuff. You don't want to stop. You don't want to wait to come home. In other words, let all the VOCs come out and play, and then you come home and you get rid of them over the next 12 hours. Everybody understand that? You want it to be going all the time, and that's our general consensus. Is because it's not a matter of only when people aren't the problem. Houses are the problem, and everything in them. And so constant ventilation, constantly breathing is important. Having it demand controlled driven by CO2 levels, by occupancy, by, you could use sensors. And sensors are being developed. There's one consortium in Europe developing sensors that would measure VOCs in a whole range of different things, and you could drive it that way. So that is something that is in the works. But in general, if you have an extremely efficient system that's running, a lot of the houses we're running anywhere from 18 to 28 to 30 watts of power to run continuously to run ventilation. You boost, you use more. But for general, all-day, continuous ventilation, if you can keep it at a very low level like that and your efficiency of recovery is extremely high, it's not really worth trying to turn it off when you're not there, because when you turn it off, just because you're not there doesn't mean that all the rest of that stuff that we talk about isn't there. So, does that still not happy? I mean, what do you envision? I mean, what?
I'm envisioning some of the studies that Fred talked about. Taking some of those. I'm not sure how robust those are, but saying, okay, we're reasonably certain that if you keep these pollutants at these levels, then you're going to have a safe house. Therefore, we're going to develop controls for your ventilation system. I mean, right now our ventilation system controls are really primitive.
Yeah.
We have arbitrary standards like 622.
Yeah.
Or we've got other passive houses arbitrary standards, and then we've got we have some occupant control. Well, it kind of smells skanky in here, so I'm going to boost it for a while. But we don't really know what's going on with the pollutants that you so gruesomely listed, Fred. If we're going to take those large-scale health studies seriously, then we need to be figuring out how our ventilation systems should really be operating in houses, and I don't see a lot of progress on that front.
Go ahead.
The exterior stuff is a little bit different than the interior stuff, particularly the CO2. The exterior stuff ought to be simple, which is you've got a size of particulate, you've got a filter, and it ought to work to keep out whatever the percentage is. And I don't think we're looking for 100%. I mean, the human body can deal with all kinds of toxins. You just try to keep it at a reasonable level. You're dealing with stuff like which is variable, particularly CO2, which has to do with occupancy. Then you want this dynamic system, and then when you're dealing with weird stuff like building materials which are off-gassing when they're not supposed to, then you really have a difficult problem. You've got to bring in some equipment there.
Well, there's a dual approach to this, and it's two things you're doing. You're filtering to keep out those things that are outside that you don't want, those fine particulates that are generally from diesel, airplane, and so forth. And then you're diluting what's in. So if you can turn the system off and keep that out, but you're not diluting in. So you have to find a balance of that. And you always have to be diluting. I mean, our consensus is that no matter what you do. I mean, that Hayward Healthy Home, I think, is the most telling of everything. Is here's a guy, and if you knew him, and you can go to haywardhealthyhomes.com and see it. If you saw what he went through, I was part of that whole project and fanatic about it. And then here's these levels, and he's working with a guy that's Carl Grimes he's very involved with Hayward Healthy Homes. He's in Denver, and he's spoken all over the country on indoor air quality and health in homes and buildings and so forth. And he's
Was
very
his
involved.
problem in that house directly related to no ventilation?
Yeah, there was no dilution, but he didn't think he was going to have that level of that stuff in that house because he had paid so much attention to source control. No VOCs, no formaldehyde in the cabinets, no VOC paints, no carpets, no, all of those things that he was fanatic about. And yet, when they measured it, he needed ventilation. That was the critical part. He still needed to dilute.
Have you ever done any studies just running the system at a very low ventilation level and comparing results?
Oh yeah, and we're doing more and more of that in determining. It really comes down to that, like what they showed at NIA with air changes per hour in every room. But it's got to be the whole house. You can't just do a couple of rooms. You can't, you've got to make sure that you are getting air changes through the whole dwelling.
A lot of people are putting, vendors into programs, and so, it's based on occupancy in their living, habits, in their home or in their not home. So they are knocking them down to save energy, because that's this segment. But
that's not I don't see that as a big problem as long as you continue to don't allow source pollution to build up, basically. If you're continually...
So the 350 and the 550 has a means of measuring that to warrant...
We have options to do inputs for 0 to 10 volt analog inputs. We right now use a CO2 sensor, and we use a relative humidity sensor that have 0 to 10. We've done some schools with, CO2 sensors, a Comfort 550 in each classroom, for example, with a CO2 sensor. So it's demand-driven. We'd have to source the 0 to 10 analog output sensors for any number of things. You can get them. Some of them are real expensive. That's the problem. But the price of them and that's starting to be developed. Those sensors are coming down.
Can I ask one question?
Last question, John.
Going back to sort of bring it full circle, what is the game plan as far as ventilation for the 65 units that I spent time doing low-income development in Roxbury, where asthma levels are astronomical, state-funded projects, no carpet, no vinyl, strict restrictions on sort of what you can do because of that, but one continuous fast fan and exhaust all day, 20 and then boosting it up. So I'm sort of curious, how do each unit get?
Yeah, each unit has an
200.
Has an HRV.
Or like the ERV.
200, okay. And then another one for hallways and stuff? Or do you have
larger unit, yeah.
Yeah, and we'd like to make these available for most sensitive areas, daycare centers, schools, and it's enticing. The city of Somerville has serious problems with public housing in the area 93. We also have energy problems there simultaneously. If you can tighten up those buildings and put HRVs, you really take care of both the air quality, very serious illness.
in the existing buildings?
Yeah, the study that was done by Tufts and BU and Yale, I think, on illness, particularly among children.
Yeah.
So you can do an energy retrofit plus an air quality thing at the same time, and that's really the exciting thing.
It seems like your project will really push forward the conversation. It's great that we all work, most of us in the residential world, in single-family homes, but there's a much larger effect in that neighborhood being built overnight, you know, practically.
Well, we wish more people would do it. I mean, I think that a lot of buildings, large buildings are being built which shouldn't be built. It's a waste, just a wasted opportunity.
So Rick,
That's why we need people from the state to come to us.
right, Rick has the real last question. It's going to be really succinct.
Because I'm following up, I'm glad we drifted into multifamily, which is the consensus to do multifamily unitized, each unit gets its own HRV, whereas in Europe it's centralized.
No, it isn't.
Really?
No. And they're moving more and more to individual.
Well, especially if the envelope's tight enough.
It's, I've got a pretty good handle on that. I've traveled in Europe with our guys and gone touring and so forth,
You have
so.
to get a unit even smaller than you've got.
Oh, yeah, we've got right down to a little through-the-wall unit, 40 CFM, individual units that are coming. But, and I know the 475's doing the Lunos units that are doing that type of.
Well, that's your competitor, right?
So you've got ways to do that, but the central systems are very complex
I agree.
and complicated as far as controls and so forth. The other thing, we're working with a project with BC Hydro and a developer out in Vancouver right now. It's a 48-unit tower, and BC Hydro examined and did studies on that building, and it's got a central system now, and it doesn't work well at all. They've got wind effect, stack effect, all of these different factors, and they've already sealed up the envelope, put triple glazed windows in, tightened the whole envelope of this entire tower. Now they're looking to put in individual HRVs because the central system isn't working. Some apartments have too much ventilation and some have none.
It's not compartmentalized, right?
And so they've got the stack effect going and all the rest. And so these are pretty well built and they've retrofitted it, but they still have these issues. So that's where individial units can be,
All right, so now we really have to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Because the BSA does us huge favors by letting us use the space for free, and we're supposed to get out on time as well. So,
I tried.
yeah, thanks, Barry and Fred.
So we need to be out of here by 8 o'clock. Cleaning crew is coming in here, and the last person that caused them not to be here is in charge of finding us new space.